Hello, everybody, and welcome again to my home. I'm Patrick Rowley from the James E. Richmond Science Center, back for another episode of Science on the Sphere at Home, using the SOSx app from NOAA, or the Science on the Sphere Explorer, a way to visualize some of the Science on the Sphere data sets that we have at the Science Center on our huge floating globe. But when we don't have huge floating globes in our homes, we turn to this SOSx app here, have it projected up onto the TV right now. Today, we're going to be talking about just a couple of data sets looking at life on Earth. We've spent time talking about satellites, air, water, land. Today we're going to kind of focus on some of the life in those different parts of the Earth. So we're going to start today with some vegetation and seasonal changes. So I'll pull that up on the screen bigger for you. All right, there we go. So this is, again, vegetation seasonal changes for 1 year. In this case, it's from April of 2012 through April of 2013 to give us an idea of how the vegetation changes over the course of the year. So I'll go ahead and start the animation. And this data comes from the SUMI NPP satellite, one of those polar orbiting satellites we talked about when we were looking at the satellites, episode 2. I believe. And so there are instruments that are on the satellite that are able to detect just subtle changes or differences in greenness on Earth. These instruments are part of VIIRS, which is the Visible Infrared Imager Radiometer Suite, all right? And like I said, this is through 1 year. And so what we can see are these different shades of green. The darker green really means a lot of more lush vegetation. And that is sensed by the sensors in these instruments because they're able to absorb more of the sun's visible light. You compare that to some of the lighter areas, especially if we look in some of the more kind of desert areas, like there in the deserts of Africa, where we have more sparse vegetation, no vegetation. That could be deserts covered in snow, and at times the vegetation, droughts, rocky areas, even urban areas. So it's a very high resolution sort of data here. And so what's interesting is the change in seasons. If I start this back in April in North America here, you can see there's a lot of green, and it's getting greener as we go into the spring and summer, even as we go up into Canada there. But as we start going back into the fall and then into the winter, that green starts kind of disappearing because the trees, a lot of the trees are losing their leaves or they're covered in snow. All right, and then we start going back again for the next year. So we can really see those seasonal changes there. While we're at it, we'll go look in another place. Let's look in the southern hemisphere here. Back it up. So you can see along the equator here, there's a lot of green, like through the rainforest and the jungles a lot of the time. But down here, as we go further away from that area, is where we start losing some of that green, though nowhere near as the kind of the clear difference as we saw in North America. Right, and the other data set I want to show you today is also in the land category on the app here, but looking at life in flight. This is bird migration patterns in the Western Hemisphere, okay? So we see all of these dots on here moving around. And so each of those is an estimated location of the center of each species population for each day. It goes daily on this data set, all right? Now, let's fix that. And this particular data set is looking at around 118 species of terrestrial bird populations in the Western Hemisphere, all right? So if we look here, we can see these birds, and at this point, they get really jumpy, all right? And now, where do these observations come from? Well, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. So it comes from the eBird Citizen Science Database, which was launched by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, as well as the National Audubon Society. And it's a citizen science database. So if you're not familiar with citizen scientists or databases, that's anybody, you, me, or bird watchers, for example, can go onto this database and record sightings of different types of birds. And then that's into this database that scientists and researchers can then use. For example, NASA has an app as well where you can look at cloud data, and as a citizen scientist, that helps them with their satellite imagery as well. So citizen scientists are great. Now, you'll notice we also have these colors in the background, kind of behind this bird data. That's just the average daily air temperature to kind of show how the seasons are changing during this time period. You'll also notice that some of the birds have very kind of just straight line, almost back and forth patterns as they move north before they move south. Others, though, seem to kind of move out over the ocean and loop around as they come back. So it's just how different species work. Some of them are using the winds in their advantage to kind of help them travel. And that's all I've got for you today. Next week, we'll be looking at people. One I'm looking forward to us looking at is human impact on marine ecosystems. We'll be looking at some other human connections and influences on the Earth as well. So until then, be sure to check out our Science at Home activities. A whole new set of them will be published tomorrow. And remember to wear a mask if you have to go out. That includes at work if you're working around other people. So please do that. Keep us all safe. I'm trying to keep you safe. You keep me safe. Have a good one.